In this time of the year where we approach what is, for all intents and purposes, the moment in which the earth as it stands moves through a very specific stage in relationship to our sun. It's called an equinox, the point at which in this instance we begin to move from the darkest hour into the longest light. It has to do with the way our earth moves around the sun and its axis. But the bottom line is that part of the reason for the celebration of Christ's life, of the divine, is because in it we start to understand that there is always this movement, there is always something taking place, an exchange that's incessant that we're all a part of. And more importantly, that in this instance, that time represents when something of light begins to come into the darkness. And for those that know Scripture, the darkness knows nothing about the light that comes in and dismisses it, that changes everything that had formerly been under its authority. And the fact is that the whole of these teachings is about the fact that within each and every one of us, whether we know it or not, lives another order of being, a completely different kind of consciousness, one that isn't captured by time and all of the troubles and all of the pursuits, but that stands above that level of our own present mind, much like the sun comes and sits over the earth and dispels the darkness, and that our lives are intended to be a gradual entrance into that broader life in one of the greater mansions, as was spoken of in the New Testament, so that in the entrance into this new life, we can begin as human beings to fulfill what all of us have, unless we've been so damaged that it's beyond repair. And every one of us hopes to be a better human being. To be a man or a woman who's more patient, a man or a woman who understands that anger, no matter how justified, is destructive to the person who holds it, let alone what he or she does to the world. They wield that in. And we have hope for each other, that each of us might gradually grow into the kind of man or woman that yet we are not, and there's no question about it, but yet that lives inside of us and sits as the seed of a certain kind of dissatisfaction that we all experience whenever we miss the mark, when we're angry or cruel or cold, when we punish someone. We understand, if not in that moment, not yet, that that was not what we meant to be. We did not do the good we would, but we did the evil we would not, and did not know that we were doing it. And yet there we are, sitting with that on our hands, wondering if we can find a way to justify what we've done. And there is something in us that knows there's no justification for hatred. There's no justification for blame. We know it, but it's buried in us. And so this idea of a rebirth, this idea that we are brought into this world with something inside of us that already understands that because it is already a part of it, that's what this season represents. And that is what you and I are intended to do with our lives. Not just when we come to a gathering to worship, not just when we want to acquire self-knowledge so that we can escape some suffering because we can imagine we're different than we are, but every moment of our life. But in this world that we now live in, there's very little in it and in us that understands any of this anymore. We're placated by the idea of perfection because we can imagine it and then hate ourselves when we miss the mark. We can go someplace on Sundays or whenever we do, when we meditate or worship or pray, and be satisfied for that duration and then walk out the door and have someone cut us off or something go wrong and turn into the human being that then we wish we weren't anymore, instead of understanding that every one of those moments, every one of them, is intended to deliver us into a relationship with this God, with this light, with this understanding, so that the moments themselves become seeds of another order of self,